For 18 centuries, scholars tried to decipher what John really meant. Then, in 1844, archaeologists found papyri in Egypt that changed everything. Some ancient manuscripts did not carry 666, they carried 616. And that detail, ignored by almost everyone, is the key that unlocks the true meaning of the most feared number in the Bible. Put into perspective the moment when this text was written. We are in the late 1st century after Christ. The Roman Empire dominates the known world so absolutely that any other power seems unreal. Rome controls a territory stretching from present-day Scotland to the Persian desert, from the banks of the Rhine to the sands of the Sahara. It is estimated that approximately 50 to 80 million people lived under Rome's direct rule, roughly 1/4 of the entire world population at the time. This empire was not merely large, it was a machine of control unprecedented in human history. Roads connecting continents, armies capable of reaching any point within weeks, a tax system that reached every village and every significant transaction. For the inhabitants of the Mediterranean, Rome was not simply a political power. It was the physical reality of the world. And in this landscape of absolute control, an old man exiled on a barren island picked up a quill and wrote 3 words that would make the greatest empire on earth tremble, if anyone understood what they truly meant. John was on Patmos, a rocky island in the Aegean Sea, just over 50 kilometers from the coast of what is today Turkey. 13 kilometers long, 8 wide, no significant natural resources, no commercial importance. Exactly the kind of place Rome used as a human depository, a destination of exile for those who were troublesome enough to be removed from society, but not important enough to warrant immediate execution. A sentence of invisibility, a form of slow death without the need to dirty one's hands. John had been sent there because of what the Roman authorities called the testimony of Jesus. He was an old man. Historians' estimates place his age between 60 and 80 years when he wrote the text that would come to be called Revelation, which in Greek simply means apocalypse, unveiling, that which was hidden and now appears. An elderly man exiled on a barren island, separated from the Christian communities he had helped build over decades, separated from the people he knew by name, whose daughters he had baptized, whose fathers he had buried, and it was there that he wrote. Revelation chapter 1, verse 9. I, John, your brother and companion in the suffering and kingdom and patient endurance that are ours in Jesus, was on the island called Patmos because of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. Without excessive drama, without self-pity, just the fact recorded with the precision of someone who knows the text needs to outlast its own author. It needs to survive exile, persecution, time. It needs to reach the right hands and be understood by the right people, and only by them. The problem that had placed John there was not purely religious. It was political, economic, and existential all at once. The Roman Empire had developed a loyalty system that functioned like a gear of extraordinarily precise social control. At the center of that system stood the imperial cult, the practice of recognizing the emperor as a living deity or son of the gods. This was not merely symbolic. To participate in markets, commercial guilds, civic banquets, to exist economically within the Roman system, you needed in some way to acknowledge the divine authority of the emperor. In the cities of Asia Minor, temples dedicated to the imperial cult existed in Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, and Thyatira, all mentioned by name in Revelation. Civic ceremonies included offerings to the emperor. Coins bore his face with titles declaring his divine nature: Divus Augustus, Divi Filius, son of a god. For Christians, this was impossible to accept, not out of cultural whim, Out of fundamental conviction, there was only one Lord, and that Lord was not Caesar. But the consequence of that conviction was economic exclusion, social exclusion, and frequently physical persecution. You could not buy in regulated markets. You could not sell your goods with legal protection. You could not belong to the guilds that protected your trade. You were branded as subversive, as a disruptor of the divine order of the cosmos. And depending on the historical period and the temperament of the local ruler, that brand could cost you everything, including your life. Now we need to talk about Nero. Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, Emperor of Rome from 54 to 68 after Christ. Adopted son of Emperor Claudius, he rose to power with the support of his mother Agrippina, whom he later had assassinated. He executed his first wife on false charges of adultery. Poppaea Sabina, his second wife, died when he kicked her during an advanced pregnancy. The historians Suetonius, Tacitus, and Cassius Dio recorded these events with a level of detail suggesting that the horror needed to be documented with precision, as if the absence of record would itself be a form of complicity. But what marked the Christian communities in an absolutely indelible way was something specific. In July of the year 64 after Christ, a fire devastated Rome. The blaze lasted 6 days and 7 nights. It destroyed 10 of the 14 districts of the city. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their homes, their businesses, their family histories accumulated over generations. The Roman historian Tacitus recorded persistent rumors that Nero himself had ordered the fire set in order to free up space to build his megalomaniacal palace, the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a complex that would come to occupy 300 acres at the heart of Rome, including an artificial lake and a 30-meter statue of Nero himself, representing him as the sun god. Whether or not Nero ordered the fire, historians debate to this day. What is not debated is what came next. Faced with a furious population that blamed him for the disaster, Nero needed a scapegoat. And he found one in the relatively small group of followers of a Jewish preacher crucified 30 years earlier in a provincial city called Jerusalem. What followed was the first systematic persecution of Christians recorded by secular Roman history. Tacitus describes with cold precision what happened. Christians were arrested for hatred of the human race, a charge that reflected how Rome viewed a group that refused to participate in civic rituals and declared loyalty to a king other than Caesar. Some were covered in animal skins and thrown to dogs. Others were crucified along the roads leading out of Rome. Others were soaked in flammable substances and set alight to illuminate Nero's gardens during nighttime festivities. The brutality was such that even Tacitus recorded that a feeling of commiseration arose among ordinary Romans toward the victims, because the cruelty surpassed any notion of justice. 2 of the most prominent leaders of the Christian movement were executed in Rome during this period. Peter, according to tradition, preserved since the earliest centuries and corroborated by archaeological excavations beneath St. Peter's Basilica, was crucified upside down at his own request. Paul was beheaded, the method reserved for Roman citizens, a status he in fact possessed. Nero was the face of power that crushes, the face of the system that demands absolute loyalty and destroys those who refuse. The face that the Christian communities of the first century recognized immediately when they thought of the word persecution, not as theological abstraction, but as living, recent, bleeding memory. Like the name of someone who had killed people you knew personally, now we arrive at the technical core of the mystery. To understand it, you need to understand a system that was completely familiar to first-century readers, but has become practically invisible to modern readers: gematria. Gematria is a system of correspondence between letters and numbers. In the ancient world, before the widespread use of the Arabic numerals we use today, the letters of the alphabet served both to represent sounds and to represent numerical values. In Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, each letter had a fixed numerical value established by convention. Aleph, the first letter of Hebrew, was worth 1. Beth was worth 2. Gimel was worth 3. The higher value letters could represent hundreds. In Greek, Alpha was worth 1, Beta was worth 2, Iota was worth 10, Rho was worth 100, and Sigma was worth 200. This meant that any word, any name could be converted into a number. Add up the numerical values of each letter in a name, and you have the number of that name. This practice was used in wall inscriptions in Pompeii. Archaeologists found graffiti saying, "I love the one whose number is such and such," without directly revealing the name. It was used in Jewish religious texts and in Greco-Roman literature. It was not occultism. It was not magic. It was the writing system of the era, applied creatively to communicate information without having to state it openly. A code, known to those who needed to know, and completely opaque to those outside the group. Now apply that system to the name Nero Caesar, written in Hebrew characters, which is exactly what a Jewish Christian of the 1st century would naturally do when needing to reference the Roman emperor, because Hebrew was the sacred language and the reference language of the tradition from which the Christian movement had emerged. Transliterated into Hebrew, the emperor's name appears as Neron Caesar. The corresponding Hebrew letters are Nun, Resh, Vav, Nun for the first name, Kof, Samek, Resh for the surname, and the numerical values of each letter are as follows. Nun is worth 50, Resh is worth 200, Vav is worth 6, Nun is worth 50 again, Kof is worth 100, Samek is worth 60, Resh is worth 200. Add it all up. 50 plus 200 plus 6 plus 50 plus 100 plus 60 plus 200, 666. Now return to the detail of the manuscript discovered in 1844. Some ancient papyri of Revelation carried the number 616 instead of 666. For centuries, scholars considered this detail simply a copyist's error, a mistake made during the countless hours of manual text reproduction in conditions of poor lighting. Errors of this type are documented in dozens of ancient manuscripts. It would seem reasonable to assume that 616 was one such mistake. But when the gematria system is applied carefully, the variant ceases to be an error and becomes an extraordinary confirmation. If you transliterate Nero Caesar into Hebrew, omitting the final second Nun, a legitimate spelling variation that existed at the time, the total changes from 666 to 616. The variant is not a copyist's error. It is another version of the same statement, built on a different spelling of the same name, arriving at a different number by the same method. Two distinct numbers, two distinct manuscripts, a single identity pointed to by the calculation. The scholar Irenaeus of Lyon in the 2nd century mentioned the variant in his writings while defending 666 as the correct form, without realizing that both numbers are mathematically consistent with the same system applied to spelling variants of the same name. This is more than extraordinary. It means that when John wrote in Revelation chapter 13, verse 18, "This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. He was not constructing a vague and abstract prophecy about some nameless future tyrant. He was naming someone with precision. He was using a system that his readers knew as naturally as you know a mathematical symbol. He was saying a coded name that any educated Christian in Asia Minor would decode in seconds, but that would be completely opaque to a Roman official who intercepted the text. And now, the first of the questions that this understanding inevitably provokes. What happens when a power is too great to be called by its true name? You need to understand the concrete context of why the code was necessary. Texts that circulated among the Christian communities of the first century were hand-copied and transported from city to city by messengers who traveled the Roman roads with rolls of papyrus hidden under their clothing. They were read aloud at meetings that took place in private homes in the middle of the night, with sentinels posted at the corners. If a text contained direct accusations against the emperor, if it named Nero outright and described him as a beast responsible for the massacre of innocents, the bearer would be executed. Those who copied it would be executed. Those who read it publicly would be executed. The code was not a philosophical puzzle. It was the difference between life and death for real people with names, families, and histories. John was not the first to use this kind of language. Jewish apocalyptic literature, of which the Christian revelation is a direct and conscious descendant, had developed over centuries a tradition of coded language for describing enemy powers. The Book of Daniel, written during the brutal persecution of the Seleucid king Antiochus IV Epiphanes in the 2nd century before Christ, used the same kind of language with beasts and numbers to represent specific empires: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Hellenistic Greece, Rome, without ever needing to write those names in a way that would make the text automatically subversive. Any literate Jew of the period knew that code because the survival of the people had depended on that skill repeatedly. John was using the same language, for the same purpose, for the same kind of audience, but the number 666 is not the only element of revelation that points to Rome. The entire symbolic structure of the book is built upon that historical reality in ways that become visible as soon as the context is restored. In Revelation chapter 17, the beast is described as having 7 heads, and the angel explains, "The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated, and they are 7 kings." Rome was universally known in the ancient world as the City of 7 Hills: the Palatine, the Capitoline, the Quirinal, the Viminal, the Esquiline, the Caelian, and the Aventine. This was one of the most immediate and recognizable descriptions of Rome used by Roman poets, by Greek historians, by travelers from all parts of the Mediterranean. Any first-century reader who reached that passage would know immediately which city the text was talking about. There was no possible ambiguity. The great prostitute described in the same chapter, sitting upon the waters and drunk with the blood of the saints, is explicitly identified in verse 18. "The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth." In the 1st century, there was only one city that fit that description without needing any additional argument. The number 6, in the numerical symbolism of the biblical world, carries a specific weight. It is the number of the human. Man was created on the 6th day, according to Genesis. The number 7 is the number of completeness and divine perfection. The 7th day is the day of rest, of fullness, of the sacred. The number 666 is 6 not once, not twice, but 3 times, tripled, amplified, taken to its own extreme. It is the human who proclaims himself divine. It is imperfection pretending to be perfection. It is earthly power demanding the devotion that belongs only to the eternal, with the absolute conviction that it has that right. It is not an arbitrary number chosen to create suspense. It is a theology compressed into 3 digits. It is a statement about the nature of every power that absolutizes itself. And then there is the mark. Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 and 17. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast, or the number of its name. This passage is perhaps the most misinterpreted in all of Revelation. For centuries, it has been read as a prophecy about some future identification technology, subcutaneous chips, digital tattoos, biometric systems, credit cards. Each generation found its own candidate for the prophesied technology, but when you restore the historical context of the first century, the image changes completely. In the Roman Empire, participation in economic life was deeply intertwined with participation in the imperial cult. Commercial guilds, the associations of artisans, merchants, cobblers, blacksmiths, fishermen, weavers, held their meetings in temples dedicated to patron deities, often including ceremonies in honor of the emperor. To be a recognized member of a guild, you participated in those ceremonies. Without a guild, you lacked the legal and commercial protection the association offered. To participate in legally sanctioned markets, you needed to demonstrate your standing as a citizen in good civic and religious standing. A Christian who refused to participate in the cult was not merely a religious dissident in an abstract sense. He was economically invisible in very concrete ways, excluded from the mechanisms that guaranteed the survival of any working family. This is what John was describing, not a technological prophecy about future implants. An economic reality lived by his readers every week when they tried to support their families and maintain their businesses without compromising their convictions. How did we arrive then at the current situation, where 666 is associated with horror films, with products carrying unfortunate number sequences, with global conspiracies of digital control? The process was gradual, but it began with something identifiable: temporal distance combined with the loss of cultural context. The first readers of Revelation, at the end of the first century, understood the code immediately. John was writing to real, named communities, the 7 churches of Asia Minor: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. These people lived the described reality. They knew persecution firsthand. They knew the imperial cult as part of daily life. They knew gematria. For them, the number was neither mysterious nor terrifying as an abstraction. It was a sign of recognition, a code among people in the same difficult situation. But as the centuries passed, the historical context was lost. Rome fell in the 5th century. The imperial cult disappeared. Hebrew gematria became unknown to most Christians as the movement became increasingly Gentile in its composition. And the text remained, translated into Latin, then into vernacular languages, copied in monasteries, but without the instruction manual that the original readers carried in cultural memory. In the absence of context, the number became an abstract mystery. Over the centuries, each generation found its own candidate for the title of Incarnation of the Beast. The Pope, in the hands of Protestant reformers. Napoleon, when the terror of the French Revolution disturbed the European Christian imagination. Hitler, Stalin, American presidents, figures from the Middle East. The number was applied to every sufficiently threatening figure, and each application emptied the original meaning a little more. The popular culture of the 20th century completed the process with novels, films, and series that transformed 666 into a supernatural entertainment brand, completely separated from the text that originated it. But here is the detail that keeps the text relevant beyond the historical correction. John was not merely describing Nero. He was describing a pattern that Nero embodied with clarity, but that was not exclusive to him. The pattern works like this: a centralized power that demands total loyalty, an economic system that uses financial participation as a tool of control and punishment, a propaganda that transforms the ruler into something sacred, a binary logic that treats resistance as a crime against the natural order. The garb changes, the pattern remains. What makes John an extraordinary observer is not that he foresaw technologies of the 21st century. It is that he identified a mechanics of power, absolutism, economic control, divine propaganda, and punitive exclusion that repeats itself in radically different contexts, crossing millennia. How did a group without weapons, without armies, without political power of any kind, manage to name the greatest empire of the known world for what it truly was, by calling the beast by name, even if they needed a code to do it safely? Nero committed suicide, abandoned in a villa on the outskirts of Rome in June of 68 after Christ, after being declared a public enemy by the Senate. The man who had turned the world's capital into a scene of horror, who had terrorized a continent, who had executed apostles and set saints ablaze, died asking a slave to help him kill himself because his hands were trembling too much to do it alone. The slave did what was asked. The emperor died with the phrase recorded by history, "Qualis artifex pereo." What an artist dies in me. Rome's response to the chaos that followed was the year of the 4 emperors, 69 after Christ, a year in which the system that had seemed eternal and inevitable revealed its fundamental fragility in a way that no propaganda could erase. 4 different men claimed the title within a matter of months. The eternal does not usually behave that way. For 2,000 years, this number was misread, mistranslated, ripped from the context that gave it meaning, and transformed into superstition disconnected from any verifiable historical reality. It became a symbol of fear instead of a symbol of courage. It became an instrument of paranoia instead of an instrument of clarity. And the process by which that happened is itself a study of how powerful systems manage to neutralize their own criticism. Not by banning the text that denounces them, but by making that text so obscure and so terrifying that no one can any longer read the name it contains. But John's first readers understood immediately. They did not need 500-page theological commentaries. They did not need academic conferences on papyrus manuscripts from Egypt. They did not need elaborate decoding systems or years of specialized study. They read the number. They did the calculation. They read the name. They felt the weight of that name, the name of the man who had covered their brothers in tar and set them ablaze to light parties. And they continued, facing the greatest empire of the age, without weapons, without armies, without political power of any kind, only with a text that circulated in rolls of papyrus carried under the clothing of messengers. A text that called the emperor by his true name. Not by the name he used in his official titles, not by the name that appeared on coins with halos of divinity, but by his number calculated according to the most honest system available, the system that converts each letter into its value and adds everything up without adornment. 666. Not a supernatural 7-headed being descended from the cosmos to terrorize humanity. A man, a number of a man, as the text itself says explicitly. A man with a name, with a face, with a documented history of cruelty and destructive ambition, called by name, in code, with courage enough to sign it. That is what makes the number 666 powerful when you encounter it in its original context. Not the cosmic fear it generated in generations who lost the context. The specific, located, historically verifiable courage it demanded from those who wrote it and from those who read it for the first time. The courage to name power for what it is, even if you need a code to do it without dying. The courage to say, in letters calculated with precision, this emperor is not divine. This system is not eternal. This number of a man does not deserve what it demands of you. John wrote from a barren island of exile, to communities scattered across cities he could no longer visit, about a man who had terrorized a continent, using a system that his readers understood and that his persecutors did not. And that text survived 2,000 years. It survived Nero, who died abandoned asking a slave for help. It survived the Roman Empire, which ceased to exist in the 5th century. It survived every generation that misread it, misinterpreted it, transformed it into superstition or into entertainment. It arrived in your hands, still carrying the name,